be broken, that it be not a people. And the head of Ephraim is Samaria, and the head of Samaria is Remaliah's son. If ye will not...
Good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. Continuing in the Gospel of Luke chapter 23. And Pilate, Jesus being delivered to Pilate. Pilate delivers him to Herod. Herod does not exactly get out of Jesus what he was hoping, which was a miracle. He mocks him, sets a gorgeous robe upon him, or a brightly colored, if you were to be more strict in the translation, and returns him to Pilate. And I was pointing out the thing, Herod knew all about Jesus. Therefore, I think it's pretty unthinkable to me that Pilate was like, well, who is this for the first time? Like he had not heard of all the goings on. He had. He probably already knew there was no threat. That's why he immediately said, I find no fault in him. You know, are you the Christ? And he's like, you said it. And he's like, I find no fault in him. Because he understood the nature, to some degree. I mean, you can't have a governor who's completely ignorant of the political situation. And he's not. But still, the elders the elders of the people have come before him with very vehement accusations. It's the fact that they're worked up, they are a threat. But he can't just execute all the Jews because they're angry about this one guy. Let's see. Let's go back. 13. And Pilate, when he had called together the chief priests and the rulers of and the people, again, it's not like a representative body of all Jewry or anything. It's just the chief priests, the rulers, and the people who had been already there. It was pretty much the chief priests and the rulers' chosen multitude, lesser functionaries. Said unto them, Ye have brought this man unto me as one that perverteth the people. Behold, I, having examined him before you, have found no fault in this man, touching those things whereof you accuse him. And I said, I don't know if there was a more extensive questioning of Jesus, and he didn't really, like I said, he didn't try to defend himself. I think on some level, it can only be that Pilate understood the nature of, Jesus coming into the city on the donkey and everyone getting excited about it, the incident in the temple. But the thing is, he drove out the money changers. I don't remember if that was recorded in Luke. Didn't they record it? Yeah, he did. But then he continued to teach for days. It might have been a little alarming when he cast out the money changers, I suppose, like, okay, what's going on here? Some big deal, some tumult in their temple. But on some level, a lot of people resented the presence of people doing commerce in the temple. Otherwise, that would be, that's understandable as something that he would get away with. And then for days afterwards, he was with them daily teaching in the temple. I only say this because I've heard some so-called historians, and I'm sure they have degrees and all that stuff, suggest that the reason Jesus was put to death was because of the incident casting out the commerce in the temple. That's why he was killed. And while I'm sure that did not please the elders and the chief priests, on the other hand, it's as strong as it might seem to some people, it was nowhere near as offensive as the fact that he claimed to be the casting out the money changers was only symbolic of his rejection of them. and the fact that they felt threatened by him in their leadership. I mean, just like if you have a pastor of a church and some guy just comes there doing miracles and saying things, and then the pastor maybe chimes in and then he rebukes that guy, and makes him look bad in front of everybody. And it says someone with the testimony of God through the working of wonders and miracles comes and rebukes you. There's two ways you can go. You can either humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, as it's written, and sort of accept it, and honestly, a lot of time, is there a more or less likely outcome? I guess it depends on the person. But for some people, there really is only one outcome. I mean, and actually, probably for everybody. I mean, because God knows the outcome. It's not like it's like some roll of the dice to Him. So, I had a few things run through my head. We're going to need to get off on a side track. So anyways, he finds no fault with him. And I can't imagine that it's the casting out. It went on for days afterwards. He wasn't arrested immediately. It took days. He may have, the chief priest may have feared the people, but Pilate didn't fear anything from the Jews. So as far as arresting Jesus for doing something technically illegal, they don't even accuse him of that. It's because he claims to be the Messiah, the Son of God, that infuriates them. It's a religious offense. That's why Pilate doesn't want to really have anything to do with it, because he knows it's some sort of religious squabble, and he sees that, and he doesn't want to be part of it. He's not trying to foment revolution. He knows this. He knows he's not some revolutionary trying to stir up the people against Caesar. But that's what he's being accused of. But he's taken a look at the man, probably has intelligence on the man, and knows that this is not true. I found no fault in this man, touching those things whereof you accuse him. No, nor yet Herod. For I sent you to him, and lo, nothing worthy of death is done unto him. And, when Herod was not pleased with Jesus and mocked him and stuff, but neither did he want to give necessarily, the Pharisees wanted him killed, which, the elders of the people, I think that there was a somewhat reluctance, because, like I said, there was animosity between Pilate and the leaders of the people, and there's animosity between Herod and the leaders of the people. And this incident brings Herod and Pilate together a bit. Not because of like, oh, didn't we mock that Jesus guy together, but because of the shared experience of the elders coming to them for looking for death from this guy, and then not giving it to them, and sort of playing a little game of, well, you don't like him because he claims to be the king of the Jews, so let's put a robe on him. And they mock, they mock the very idea, because they don't see him as a threat. And the elders and the chief priests seeing him as such a threat is probably, I think, amusing. I would think so. And they don't want to give in. They're reluctant to give in to the demand. As far as I'm trying to see the human nature of it, a lot of people have analyzed what's Pilate's motivation, and that's all I'm doing. But based on the text, it seems to me a likely interpretation. Not that it's critical what you think about. Again, this is just not something particularly critical. But, I always find trying to understand human nature and human motivations enlightening. Like, if I understand how people work better, it makes I can make more sense of things. Also, I can understand the Word of God better, because it's addressing human behavior very often. So neither Herod nor I have found anything worthy of death in him. I will therefore chastise him and release him. For of necessity he must release one unto them at the feast. It was the Passover feast, and obviously Jesus is causing trouble. Pilate knows he hasn't done anything worthy of death, but he's not really causing trouble. He's being kind of a nuisance. He's a religious nuisance with this, whatever he's preaching, and this, some people are finding it controversial. Maybe the only thing Pilate has heard of his teachings might be, give to Caesar what is Caesar, what is God's, what is God's. Okay, they're upset at him for saying something ambivalent about taxation. How controversial. But he is stirring things up. In a sense, he's making the elders very angry. And that counts for something. And so he says, I will chastise him. I will, which indicates the physical punishment he's about to endure. The whipping. He's going to be whipped. I will whip him and let him go. How about that? Wouldn't you like to see him whipped? And he wants to release him because it was of necessity, it was customary. At the Feast of Passover, it's probably a custom, meaning the Romans had this custom. They knew that Passover was a big feast for the Jews, and at the time of the feast, it was like, hey, you're supposed to release one of their prisoners at this feast. It was a gesture of goodwill from Caesar. Something like that. If it's required, if it's a necessity, it's coming down from Rome, not from the Jews. And they cried out all at once, saying, away with this man, and release unto us Barabbas, who for a certain sedition made in the city, and for murder, was cast into prison. Sedition is generally the term for like undermining the government. As far as I understand, in English, what is the word used from Greek? What are we on? What verse is that? Sedition, verse 19, and then I will bring you along on our journey of discovery in the Bible Hub at BibleHub.com. And I just explained yesterday, and I guess I don't need to again, but I probably should do it at the beginning, as early in the study as possible. Though all the studies are getting listened to, so all right, where are we? Man, my eyes are so, this morning in particular, it's so hard to see this. It looks like I'll squint. That always works. I will threaten, therefore chastise him. Pedio, the way a child is chastised. Interesting. Is that really what it said? Wait, I just read it. I'm going to bring that up just for fun. Wait a second. The instant. Wait a second. Is there something wrong with my text? Let's see. Oh, there's the third time. Okay, that's later. Okay. This is Barabbas. Sedition, there it is. Okay. Yeah, paid duo. I just know paid is something with a child. It's like, so, to train children. It means to give them the child treatment. All right. An insurrection, dissension, originally standing position, place. Oh, the word stasis. Stasis actually means we use that word in English, like stasis. And it means like uprising or standing up. As far as in this context. Though the properly means a standing, by analogy, position, existence, by implication, a popular uprising. It's a fairly idiomatic use of the word. Just like uprising. If I say there's an uprising in the city, you understand that's highly idiomatic. It's only because we understand what is meant by uprising that it means a violent insurrection against authority. So that's Barabbas. He had actually done insurrection. done insurrection, and he had done murder. And Pilate probably is not interested at all in letting that guy go. Let go Jesus, the one you guys were all happy about. I mean, the leaders weren't. He still thinks it's amusing that the leaders hate him so much, and this is gonna be kind of a shock to him that they are just so out for his blood. Because he just can't tell what he's done. You can't understand the depth of the offense. I mean, like a man claiming to be, in Rome we have all kinds of people who think they're gods, perhaps. I mean, like people, Caesar thinks he's a god. I mean, everybody thinks they're a god. And there's many gods. And so, like, their whole, to the pagans, the Jewish concept of one God and in probably the sense that it's an obsession, which is there's just one. To a lot of them, that's almost mystifying. Just one. That's difficult to deal with, and it makes the Jews difficult to deal with, because that whole one God thing. But it's what creates this sort of anger when someone claims to be the Son of God. In a lot of the pagan religions, the Pharaoh was the Son of God. And in other pagan traditions, the idea of sons of God is no big deal. Only among the Jews is it even potentially some sort of blasphemy for man to be the Son of God. I mean, a lot of times maybe it's not very believable, and I'm sure Pilate has no two minds about Jesus. He is not any kind of Son of God that I can tell. In his mind, So, verse 20, Pilate, therefore, willing to release Jesus, I mean, that's his will. His will was to release Jesus. Willing here, the word in Greek would be used much more strongly. Meaning willing, meaning by force of will. Like, I will it. This is, like, a lot of times we think willing is like, well, I'm willing. Meaning I'll go along with it. But this has more of, like, willing, like if I was going to try to, to do something by sheer force of will. Meaning, like, I'm trying to enforce my will, which is to release Jesus, not Barabbas. An insurrectionist. It is the tradition, but I want to release Jesus. So he's trying to push the prisoner he wants to release. He wants to release this guy. Who knows there'll be no end of the fun, potentially. I mean, and after I whip him, he'll probably go. He figures after he's whipped, he'll be chastised. I mean, he'll go back to maybe being a carpenter or whatever he was doing. Maybe he'll cut it out. Maybe he'll leave Jerusalem in shame. When I return him to his disciples, all stripedy and whippety, all bruised and battered, looking like a complete loser, everyone will kind of shrug and go away. It'll be the end of it. What's so unforgivable? I mean, he's not exactly he's going to let him go scot-free and just go back to it. He's like, I'll whip him and let him go. And in his experience, that'll fix it. That'll fix it. He doesn't know Jesus, but he assumes by human nature that chastisement will put a complete damper on this whole grandiose thing that Jesus is doing. And he's upsetting the leaders and stuff, and he'll stop it. At least that's what Pilate thinks will probably happen. He can always be arrested again. I mean, if he doesn't cut it out, or whipped again. He can just become a standard whipped man. And again, we know it's the Lord, but I mean, think about yourself. I mean, how many beatings are you going to take and you're going to keep stirring up trouble or upsetting the elders? So that's his mind. on some level, probably. All right. He spake again unto them, but they cried, saying, Crucify him, crucify him. And he said unto them the third time, Why? What evil hath he done? I have found no cause of death in him. I will therefore chastise him and let him go. And they were instant with loud voices, requiring that he might be crucified. And the voices of them and of the chief priests prevailed. If there's any other voices there of dissent saying, No, let him go. No, they'd had a picked crowd. You know, they had a picked crowd. And again, this, sometimes in the movies they make it seem like hundreds and hundreds of people. This multitudes come in all shapes and sizes. I don't know what the minimum size of a multitude is, but the elders of the people, the chief priests, that might constitute 50 or 60 men, and plus their families and associates. A few hundred, but again, yeah. The fact, in a city of thousands, you get a few hundred people in any one place, and it's a multitude. Well, actually, 100 people, if you think about it. Imagine 10 people standing in 10 rows. 10 rows, 10 columns. It's not a big number for people, packed tightly. But still, 3-4. It's easy to see how it could be 300 or 400 people. Like each elder may have, again, because just political leaders and stuff, they have people from whom they can call in favors, or just general associates, general available manpower. And there's the temple guard. Could also be present because they were part of it. At the chief priest's house, there were people there. So, they're people of their faction. And they are established, so they have a faction. And so, so that's the source of their multitude. They were instant with loud voices. I'm going to guess that word instant is, hold on, I don't know the actual word. Well, instant with loud voices. Fortunately, when I open it up in a new window, it's bigger print. Because that's just... Epikemai. I think that's pronounced E-mai. Because the I's are pronounced E in Greek, as in most foreign languages. Very few have that long I we use in English. I am placed upon... I'm sure they do, but most languages are more phonetic than ours, like Spanish. Lovely language. So simple as far as the pronunciation. I'm going to rest upon, literally, figuratively, to impose, to be laid up, laid on. It almost seems like they were like waiting, is what it's saying, right? Let's see. I am placed upon, I'm laid upon, lie upon, imposed and pressed upon it. Absolutely. I press hard and insist. Interesting. Maybe it means insist. Instant may be the wrong word, because I'm looking for something that says some sort of time. But it actually means more like they were pressing it. They pressed the point. I like the word insist, and I think insist was instant might have used to have that force in English. Sometimes that happens, like words had a different force of meaning in the past. Like I was talking about things like the word seduce or perverting the people. That they have a different force when they are spoken in modern English than in the, I don't want to call it Old English, because the King James English is modern English. But I mean, as we have come to use English, and I can see my camera's falling behind. I don't know, this computer issue is just silly. But in modern English again, King James English is modern English, believe it or not. Old English is like Chaucer, and you can barely understand it. There's Old English, Middle English, and Modern English. And King James English is modern. It just retains a few archaic forms, meaning some words that have become archaic or fallen out of usage. And obviously, some words have changed. The way we use them has changed. Let's be careful about that sometimes when reading the King James Bible, because it was written with English used as it was used something like 200 years ago. Well, yeah, about 200. Because the original King James, the 1611 version, was even older in its usage and a little even harder to read. Certainly visually it was hard to read. I have a copy. I should show it sometime. I'll scan a page or something. I should do that. Just like my other study aids, I need a little page from the old King James so you can understand every time I bring that point up. And it's mostly important for understanding generally if you're using the King James for study, which I do like to do, but is also fraught with its own issues. Right? There's issues with the King James. People are King James only. That's fine as long as you take, well, King James only I think is ridiculous, but I prefer it. I prefer the King James, over other translations. Because the Bible is a very ancient text, and I like having it written in a language that's slightly older than mine. I mean, a version of English that's a little archaic. It's the proper spirit of the thing, in my opinion. And if you prefer modern translation, there are more decent ones than others, but you gotta be careful of the ones that are thought for thought as opposed to actual the translators are trying to play the role of teacher, and if you want to be taught, it's fine. But again, a translator is oftentimes the thought when you go into translation, you think they're giving me the word unadulterated from God or from the authors of the Bible, right? But that's not actually the case very often. You are getting an adulterated interpretation of the text. But unlike having a teacher who guides you through it and will explain to you why they're changing things, or why this word that you might think means one thing, and like as far as when we translate it, but like why in context it has a different force, and this comes up in the translations. Even the King James has to do it sometimes because the Hebrew is so obscure oftentimes, and the way there are certain Hebrew idioms which do not translate well into English, and I can't think of them off the top of my head, but there are points at which the King James is not a one-to-one translation from Hebrew by any means, especially Hebrew. And Greek also not so much. All right. I think because they knew more about Greek when they translated the Bible than they did about Hebrew. So they were instant with loud voices. They insisted with loud voices, I think, requiring that he might be crucified. Because again, the requiring and insisting, it sounds like the right family of words. And the voices, you could say, well, they were instant. I don't think there was any delay either. I'm not saying there was a delay. I'm just saying I don't think that's what that word is intended to mean. And the voices of them and the chief priests prevailed, and Pilate gave sentence that it should be as they required. He gives in. Because, like I said, he finds no fault in Jesus, but he is finding fault with them. But he can't crucify this multitude. He has to sort of appease them. They're not fomenting revolution. They're accusing someone of revolution, and they're really upset about it. And and also he claims to be a king. Again, they claim that he claims to be a king. Okay, and he understands that he probably knows that like some people suppose this man to be the Jewish Messiah, and he probably knows all about the idea of the Messiah, and he probably figures, well, if this is the Messiah, that I'm quite satisfied to let him just do his thing. Maybe we'll chastise him a bit so he doesn't get too uppity and start thinking grandiose thoughts. If he wants to go around tending to the sick and preaching to harlots righteousness, that's his business. got no fault with him, no reason to do him in. If he's upsetting you, I'll beat him silly. But no, they insist he be crucified. They insist on it. And at that point, he feels he has no choice. He will, then I will crucify him. Because Pilate does not, again, he is like the unjust judge. He doesn't fear God or man. He maybe fears man a bit, Caesar, but he doesn't fear that. He doesn't fear God, let's put it that way. He doesn't fear God per se. He doesn't believe there's anything to fear as far as Jesus is concerned. But he sees the anger of the Pharisee, I say Pharisees, but it's actually the elders of the people, the chief priests. Obviously Pharisees among them, but also and Sadducees, because a lot of the ruling class were Sadducees. And the elders of the Jews, again, it's from the rulers of the people, meaning the Jews' own leaders and their chief priests and their associates that this is coming. And of course the Pharisees are part of that, but the Pharisees are like a religious sect, whereas this is more of a social sect. And they are religious in their nature, but a person who's a Pharisee who does not have a lot of social standing is going to be less threatened by what Jesus is saying. And it wasn't universal among Pharisees or among the ruling classes to object to Jesus. It wasn't a universal thing. But among them, there was certainly a large degree of agreement among the majority of them, or at least the most powerful among them. That's the thing. A lot of times you get the most powerful ones, and everyone else doesn't have to feel great about it. They just go along because they fear men. But Pilate does not fear God, and he's not doing this because he thinks it's right. He's not doing justice here. In his mind, he's not doing justice. He's just giving them what they want because they insist upon it. Just like the widow woman going to the unjust judge. Avenge me of mine adversaries. We want him crucified. I don't think he should be crucified. We want him crucified. And they're yelling and screaming, and so he gives in. And he released unto them him that for sedition and murder was cast into prison, whom they had desired, but he delivered Jesus to their will. Jesus it's going to be done unto him as they desired. And as they led him away, they laid upon one Simon, a Cyrenian, coming out of the country. And on him they laid the cross, that he might bear it after Jesus. Again, Luke is skipping a lot of details. The scourging is not, he said, I will chastise him and release him, but they don't, they're like, and they let him away and scourged him. And I didn't think they mentioned the crown of thorns in this one, or of the basics, but they bring him to be crucified. They will deliver Simon. I'm sorry, not Simon. Simon of Cyrene is a Cyrenian Jew. I don't think it means he's a foreigner. It means a lot of times, because they would be in some other country or something. I didn't actually even look up Cyrenian or where that is or what. Someone from Cyprus? No, that's Cyprian. Whatever. Cyrenian. I don't think they would compel, or maybe he is just a foreigner. I don't know. It seems a strange thing. They often portray him as a foreigner, don't they? But I always thought of him as because it's the Passover, and Jews from all over the world would be present at this time. You know what I mean? All over the Roman world, anyways, right? So, his reason for being in Jerusalem is probably the Passover, and so I don't think of him as some foreigner. But he's a Jew from foreign parts, because there are Jews scattered all over the empire to some degree. I mean, not to the degree that it's going to be after AD 70. The Jews are still localized, but many Jews also did not return from captivity. And they call this effect on the Jews the diaspora, because they have been forcibly removed from their land on at least 3 occasions. At least 3 occasions. And not all of them complete, but the Assyrians, the Babylonians, and then the Romans expelled the Jews from Palestine or from Israel. But for the Romans, they did expel them from Palestine because I think that's what their province was called, according to the Romans. When they conquered it, they call it Palestine. Palestine is I believe, a Latin construction, is it not? So that would be their term for that area, I believe. I know that that term was imposed on it recently, but in modern times, meaning it wasn't always called Palestine by any means. It was Judea, Samaria. They had their names for it, and collectively Israel. Though the Jews wouldn't have called it Israel because they would have called themselves the people Israel, but the land not Israel, because the kingdom of Israel had been gone for hundreds of years. And then it would be the kingdom of Judah that had been returned, and that's why that we call them the Jews, because it's a kind of corruption of the idea of Judah. So they became the Jews to their people understood them as being that. And naming the country is kind of like an unusual thing. Where it's a modern thing, I think. Because a lot of times it was like Moab referred to the land of the Moabites. And, And I guess a lot of those things refer to, the Germany is the land of the Germans and but some countries it's not the same. Like you have mixed ethnicities into nation states, it's different. It used to be one ethnicity, one nation. Israel was Israel. Then it became Israel and Judah. But then you get Judea and Samaria. Samaria refers to the land that was occupied by Israel. But that was never called Israel again properly until modern times also. As far as because it was divided kingdom. I'm splitting hairs. It's really not necessary. That's not important information. That's something people would probably argue with, is what I'm saying. I just know that calling it Palestine upsets some people, and whatever, and I don't have any preference at all. It's just that it is a term that is convenient and people use for that place. But it was given it by the Romans, I believe. All right, and they led him away. They laid hold on him, one Simon, a Cyrenian, coming out of the country. Just getting in from the country. And on him they laid the cross, that he might bear it after Jesus. They made him carry the cross. At some point, at some point, like in the Via Dolorosa, is it called, or something but there's the stations of the cross. The Catholics go through this, and they take all the different things that happen along the way. They're not all recorded in Luke. He stumbles. Eventually, they compel Simon to carry his cross. And et cetera, et cetera. So, just a little detail. This guy was compelled to carry the cross, at least for part of the way. And they followed him a great company of people. There followed him a great company of people. And of women, which also bewailed and lamented him. So, I wonder how many women were allowed in the judgment hall of Pilate. Again, that was kind of like, it was all done real early. So people are getting out of bed as this is going on and only kind of finding out about it. Meaning the general people took him for a prophet. But they wake up and find they're crucifying him. And then the Romans are involved. And a lot of the stuff that goes on, a lot of people didn't get to see nothing. They just, a lot of times it's like this. Here's the thing. Nobody cares about the facts. A lot of times, that's the problem with justice sometimes. Like if you go to trial, the fact that you're in the courtroom being tried prejudices people against you. Just the fact that you're there. There's sort of though you're supposed to be granted the presumption of innocence, and they say this, but it's an exercise people have to go through because your very presence in the hall of justice, in the halls of justice. I mean, metaphorically, the courtroom or whatever. It sort of makes people think, well, you must have done something, It's just the natural human inclination to believe that the person brought before the judge is probably guilty of something. And so it doesn't matter, and though this is not always true, obviously. Not always true. Just as this is a crooked prosecution in the time of Jesus, there's crooked prosecutions to this day. And of course, not all. Most of the prosecutions probably are based on someone breaking a law of some sort or the other. And the laws aren't always just. But the thing is, you come into the courtroom, you sit before that jury, you look guilty. Your people are going to be inclined to think you're guilty. So it's just part of human nature. And Jesus being crucified, waking up and finding him already sentenced. For a lot of people, the women are bewailing, of course, and sad about it, but it's like people who might have had the power to like the multitude rise up and defend him. All the air is deflated out of them. As far as any gumption they might have had to stop this is destroyed by the fact, just seeing, it seems like this inevitability of the thing, because it's already an accomplished feat. He's already been arrested. He's already been tried. He's already, people are waking up to this. He's being crucified. And there's no, what additional, input is sort of like people just helplessly watch it happen. Because, like I said, now they've got the authorities involved. It's not like just, the elders of the Jews had a lot less power than the Roman government and the power of the military. Like, they had, and if they tried to pull something in the temple while Jesus was there and the people were listening to him and he was working miracles or something like that, they had a strong possibility of getting stoned themselves, just being killed outright by the mob. And if that happened, as long as no evil follows beyond that, meaning like if a bunch of Jews rise up and kill a Jew, like if some sort of mob action, because they did, it's like, well, you made a bunch of people angry. It's unlikely anything's going to happen. I mean, maybe the family, if they're richer and powerful enough, is going to come and there'll be some sort of investigation and try to find, but when it's the whole mob, what are you going to do? Go after everybody who was there that day? When you're killed by 50 people, it's like hard. We don't have this very often anymore, but like, well, you see, like sometimes when there's mob action in the cities, like where people start breaking windows and looting and something like that, it's hard to pinpoint an individual, especially if there's enough of it going on. It becomes chaos, and then it's hard to pinpoint many individuals. And so it's, especially after the fact, if no, and plus the fact that if it was in the temple, there'd be no Romans present to even witness it or to enforce the law. But now, at this point, nobody's going to lift a finger because it's like, what do we do now? What do we do? Are you going to be the first one to run up there and try to stop this? So the women bewailed and lamented him, because they would have had probably the least to do with this. Now, there was doubtless women among the elders and chief priests group, because there was a woman questioning Peter. Well, it's not clear what her role was. Certainly among the elders of the people, there aren't women. They didn't, this is not that. They're not going to have like, oh, let's ask the lady priest or the lady elder. No. It'd be all men. And mostly men who did this. So, but Jesus turning unto them said, Daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For behold, the days are coming in the which they shall say, Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bear, and the paps which never gave suck. Let's go a little further. Then shall they begin to say to the mountains, fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. For if they do these things in a green tree, what shall be done in the dry? Okay, that's going to be a nice mouthful. That may be the end of the study there. We got a nice chunk of time worth to talk about this. Because there's some cryptic language here, isn't there? Jesus. So they're weeping for him. He says, don't weep for me. Weep for yourselves and for your children. And what is the implication of what he's saying? Well, what's happening to me, I'm sure he understands why they're upset, no doubt. But he also understands that, like, what he's going through is just something he must suffer. He's prepared himself for it mentally. He's willing to do it, or as far as he submits to the Father's will to do it. Though it's not something, it's not something you would normally willingly do. I'll just submit myself to a punishment I don't deserve and that I can put a stop to. I mean, who's gonna go do that? I'm gonna allow people to harm me, and I could stop it at any time. And it's just like when people try to go. I remember various people tried out like waterboarding, to see how bad is it, And the thing is, it's never so bad. Anything like that, like torture. I'm just fixing my camera. Torture is never so bad when you know you can stop it. You can stop it, and you're able to stop it. But Jesus, though he could stop it technically, he couldn't because it was the Father's will. So he must suffer it. And in a sense, and what I'm saying is, like, though he could stop it, at the same time he couldn't. He couldn't. It was not. It had to be as the Father willed. Which is actually, like I said, like some of these people who tried waterboarding, they could stop it, and if they wanted to, they just could. And everyone would be like, oh, okay. No, there's no one forcing them to do it. Jesus not only could stop it, but he could not. Meaning, that's like a doubly worse. Now, on one hand, being able to stop it and just stopping it whenever you think it's too much, a lot, is one thing, or people have it imposed on them and they can't stop it. But they can take comfort in the fact that it's like, well, there's nothing I can do about it. But then being able to do something about having to exercise restraint, that's hard. That's tough. But he knows, I'm going to rise again. He knows this is not just the end. It's just something he must suffer. He must go through this extremely painful and unpleasant experience. He must suffer it. But he's able to bear it. Because he knows, he's able to bear it. The angels strengthen him, knowing he will bear it, and it will be, I've gone through painful things, and then they're over. And it's okay again. And he knows it will also come to an end. It's going to be a finite experience. And then there will be life from death, and resurrection, and ascension into heaven, and life everlasting, and a kingdom, and all those things. He will have all that thing. He's saying, don't weep for me. Why? Because my finite experience is about to come to an end, but yours hasn't even begun yet. Weep for yourselves and for your children. Now, doubtless, to them, he is alluding to what's going to happen to the Jews within a generation of Jesus passing. They're going to, the city is going to be burned with fire. The temple is going to be broken down. And they will say, blessed are the barren and the wombs. What this laments is that, we have a wisdom that says it's better to have loved and lost than to have never loved at all. And that's people trying to comfort themselves in the midst of terrible loss. But is it really true? Quite possibly, But that's not how people feel, actually. You know what I mean? Meaning, I believe pain is good. And to love and lose someone is unbearably painful. And it makes you wish, I would almost rather never, notice I said almost, rather never have fallen in love than that I should lose it. You know what I mean? People say that because they feel the loss so acutely. But the thing is, it's because you have such strong feeling that you get there. But it's like, without that strong feeling, what would you have? You'd have nothing, apathy. And, you know what I mean? Like, I don't find it's possible to argue that something is better than nothing. Or nothing is better than something. Sorry, I said that wrong. I think it's possible to argue that nothing is better than something. Because what do you have to compare with them? How can you compare nothing to something? Right? But the days are coming in which they will say, and I say this is foolish, but they will say it. Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bear, and the paths which never gave suck, because of all the sorrow that will be brought upon them. The sorrow at losing your child, the sorrow at the death of a loved one. You know what I mean? And when times of exceedingly great painful experiences come upon people, they say such foolish things as just like, I wish I'd never been born, or I wish I'd never had children. It's like, really? You're so sad about the loss of your children that you wish they never existed at all? That's awfully selfish. You really love them? You really love them? Because that doesn't sound like love to me. I love my children so much that losing them makes me wish they'd never existed. That's right. Losing them makes me wish they had never existed. Every happy moment in their life, I wish it was gone, so I don't feel any pain. That's how people are, though. It's a true saying. This is what people say. Blessed are the wombs that never bear, and the breasts that never gave suck. Happy are those people. Yeah, at that moment they're not feeling anything because they're not losing anything. But it's human foolishness. It's a incredibly nonsense. I love them so much I wish they'd never existed. So self-centered. You know what I mean? So self-centered. So selfish. You know what I mean? I wish they'd never existed. I wish I'd never existed. I wish the world never existed. It's just dramatic nonsense. Because we don't like feeling pain. I don't like feeling pain either. Neither does Jesus. But, you know what? It's important to be aware of pain. You know what I mean? That good creates the possibility of evil. Good, automatically, the presence of good means that, because people often, I think some people probably don't understand. Sometimes I'll talk about potential people. People that don't exist. I've had people say that's a nonsense thing. No, it's not. Any more than evil is a nonsense thing. Because, I remember watching someone talk about evil, the problem of evil, and the evil is not a thing. Like, evil is like when something good is taken away. Meaning, evil is not like some just thing. It is an effect on things. Like when good is taken away, or like when life is taken away. Life is given, it is good, and when we lose life, we call that evil. You know what I mean? We build a house, and that's good, but when an earthquake hits and destroys the house, and it falls on us and cripples us, we call that evil befalling us. Now, and also, there's human evil like malevolence, which is a bit different, but not really that different. But I'm not talking about that. A lot of times when we say he's evil, we're talking about in terms of human malevolence. But I'm just talking about just general evil. like what evil represents. Human evil, on one sense, the moral evil, yes, that's not excluded by what I'm saying. But I'm even talking about the lesser evils. You know what I mean? But the evil is taking away that which is good. In fact, one of the words for evil, I believe, in the Old Testament, ra'ah, the word most often translated evil. Like not wicked, but evil. Because wicked's different. It's like morally reprehensible, morally evil in a specific sense. But we have ra'ah, which I believe like breaking up that which was good. You know, the destruction of good is evil. And that's what it is. That's what it represents. And so, whenever you have good, like God says, I form the light and I create darkness. It's Isaiah chapter 45. I mentioned this the other day. I form the light and the darkness also. What's the exact wording? I'm going to look it up. I know it's Isaiah 45:1. All right, let me just. God knows I'm going to barely be able to read it. I don't know why today my eyes are extra blurry. I think I need to really clean these contacts. And I wear them not because I feel like I got to look any particular way for the study, but the idea of like the glare of the lights in my eyes. I was wondering, maybe I need like polarized lens. And there's some lenses that don't glare. Because I see guys wearing glasses on TV all the time and they don't glare. It seems like, thus saith the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus. Actually, it's verse like 3, right? Or 4. Great. Oh, great. Oh no, it's here. My eyes. There's none that's God beside me. Oh boy, did I like not find? Maybe it isn't Isaiah 45. Oh, that Isaiah 45 is the one. There's no Savior besides me, right? Okay. Maybe it's 43. Oh boy. All right, we're gonna do it the hard way then. Actually, it won't be hard. We'll just select clear. I'm going to select Isaiah. And I'm pretty sure I'll just put light, darkness. Only 8 references. That's good enough. I'll be able to figure it out. Oh, 45:7. Okay, I just needed to trouble. My problem is I'm having trouble reading this. My eyes are just. It is Isaiah 45, not 1. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. And because God not only, they says the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. That's probably an allusion to Job. God blesses and he takes away blessing. And that is what evil represents as far as when God says he creates evil. He brings about things that takes, like death. Right? I bring life. Out of nothing comes forth life. Out of non-life comes life. And then a return to non-life, that's evil. But because life went back to non-life, and though that is an evil that comes upon it, is it truly right to say it would be better that life had never come out? So I guess is it sort of an optimistic view of things or a pessimistic view? The optimism is represented by the saying of like to love and to to have loved and lost and to never have loved at all. That's not from the Bible, by the way. That's just, I don't know where it's from. Is that from, somebody wrote that. I'm not going to start guessing because I'll sound foolish. And I already sound foolish enough as it is. All right. For my detractors, they can have that for themselves. All right. So, it is not blessed to be barren. It is not, and that's the very point he's making, though. It's an unusual thing to say. That's not the usual things that people say. The women who bear are blessed. What he's saying is things will be so bad. When things get bad enough, this is what people say. They say, I wish I'd never been born, or I wish I'd never had children. They regret their lives because of the bitterness of the loss. Loss can make people bitter. That's true. But that's a human feeling. It's not objectively right, is what I'm saying. It's not objectively right that it's better that I never have children than I should experience this loss. I mean, I would not feel this awful emotion. I would not feel this horrible pain. You know what I mean? But to qualify it as better or worse is ridiculous. Nothing can't be compared to something. There's no, you know what I mean? I'd rather have nothing than have something and then not have it anymore. They shall say to the mountains, fall on us, and the hills cover us. Because, when bad enough things happen, this is how people start to feel. Let the mountains bury me. And I understand that feeling. It's just when you feel like when you wish you were dead. It's essentially a wish for death. I wish I'd never lived my life. I wish I was dead. That happens to people very frequently. I've thought in my time there were moments when I had things that were so bad that I felt like I felt that feeling. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean it's objectively anything like correct. I mean, I don't mean in the sense correct like, oh no, live. I just mean in the sense that like, of anything like, I never think though, I never think, oh, I'd be better off. It's more of like, I just don't want to deal with this. I don't want to deal with the calamity that's befallen me. I don't want to deal with the pain that I have to face here. It's cowardice in the face of the greatest challenges. We all, have limits of what we feel we're able to bear. Though often we can bear more than we think we can, or bear more than we care to. Like Jesus is bearing more than he cares to bear. You know what I mean? In his crucifixion. He is bearing more than he cares to bear. But he's saying, don't weep for me, because I am essentially willing to bear it. Even though it's not like, in some sense, I am assenting to bear it because it's God's will, and I will bear it, and I will come back from it. It is not something of my own will I would bear, though, because it's a bit much. You know what I mean? And there's no sin in feeling that, but you know what I mean? It's wrong to say, blessed are the wombs that never bear. But the feeling behind that, the statement's wrong, but the feelings are understandable, and it's all right to feel that way. To feel like, I don't want to bear this. Because Jesus already showed us by his agony in the garden, it's all right to feel like, I don't want to do this. It's all right to feel like, I don't want to do this, God, but I will do what you want me to do. That's perfectly honorable. It's not expected of us to like suffering. You know what I mean? God doesn't expect us to be like, like some sort of mythical figure. I love the way Jesus is portrayed because, some people think that we should be in the face of all suffering, just completely stoic and not, and he was rather stoic in many ways, but he also it is also clear in the Gospels, they always show, not in all four, but there's always a demonstration of his human feeling. And that our feelings are not of themselves sin if we submit to God's will. Like the feeling like you don't want to suffer certain things is perfectly normal. And if we are suffering them, it is enough. God sees our suffering. The very answer of does God see our suffering is like in Jesus, sending Jesus. He showed us that he sees our suffering and he cares about it. Now this last part, I don't want to leave you totally hanging on it, but we're going to talk about a little more, I think, tomorrow. But it's connected to what we just talked about. He obviously has in mind the invasion of AD 70, which the women there would actually, they might have children that would be affected by that. You know, they would by then be probably old women and or have grandchildren or whatever. I mean, well, because their children, you know, there might be men of fighting age. Because mothers don't like to just lose little children. It's like they raise children to adulthood, and then to see them die is also very horrible. You know, it's not a pleasant. No woman wants to see her child, adult or otherwise, dead. It's exceedingly traumatic, and something people want to avoid at all costs. Everyone wants their children to bury them, and not vice versa. At least, you know, normal people. And so he talks about this. For if they do these things in the green tree, what shall be done in the dry? And I've heard this interpreted in numerous ways. And we're not, you know what? I'm not going to really say anything about it. I was going to say that somehow. Let's just save this for next time, because there's no way I'm going to unpack this in 5 minutes or even a minute. I would consider if I could do it in 5, I would do it, but I don't think I can, not in 5, and we're already 5 minutes over. So on Monday we'll pick it up with the green tree and the dry tree. I'll, you know, whatever. We'll talk about it then. Anyways, thanks for joining me today. Look forward to being back Monday. It is Monday, right? I mean, it's Friday today, and Monday's coming up. Yeah. Well, if today isn't Friday, and I think it is. No, it's Friday. I'm starting to think about all the deadlines that are going today. It is today. Then it will be Monday. Thank you for joining the study, etc., etc., etc.
Thus saith the Lord God, it shall not stand, neither shall it come to pass. For the head of Syria is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is Rezin. And within 65 years shall Ephraim be broken, that it be not a people. And the head of Ephraim is Samaria.